welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 170 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 26 of A Storm of Swords, that's Jon 3.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. Hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide you some additional information about the characters and geography of this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I am doing quite well, thank you. I've had quite the full week.
Do tell. Since I've got nothing, do tell.
Well, you do, because we had lunch together this week.
We did have lunch together, which was an unusual event.
Yes, and I managed to give you your card from Jenny, your Christmas card.
Yes.
It was very
awesome.
Cool stuff. Yeah, I remember we had lunch with several folks, including your lovely wife and a friend of ours and his daughter. And there was something that we were all cracking up about, and we were like, we have to bring this up on the show, but I can't remember what it was now.
You bring this to me now, Mackelly, and you think that I might come up with something to help us here? Was it about the friend's daughter, who's in the marching band for the University of North Carolina, cheering for them to lose the ACC championship game because she preferred where they would end up in the bowl, and so she'd go to a nicer place?
We were definitely laughing about that. I don't know if that was the one that we said had to end up on the show or not, but that was quite humorous. That cracked me up at the time and afterwards. I was like, that's funny. Because if they'd gone to the higher bowl, they would have gone to Tampa or something, right. And by losing and going to a lesser bowl, they got to go to San Diego, and she gets to go as part of the marching band. Right. Yeah, hey, it's a nice consolation for losing the ACC championship game. But so that was, although the weather was terrible, like what a terrible day for me to decide to go into work. The weather was just pouring buckets all day. Anyway, but then so my I've mentioned it on the show before. My nephew has a show called Channel 5 News. It's primarily.
I hope he talks about us as much as we talk about him.
I know, right? I have a feeling that might not be the case. But so he's doing a live a nationwide tour right now, and he was in town this week, and so and on top of that, my sister flew out from LA to come to this show, so she could be here with us and go to the show with us, and so my nephew had back to back like almost every day in a new city, so he was only here for the day, but my sister stayed pretty much most of the week, so it was really great to see them because they live on the west coast of the US, I live on the east coast, so it was really fun having my sister here and getting to see my nephew. It was a really fun show. I don't think that middle-aged men were the target demographic of the show. I was at least probably a decade plus older than most of everyone else in there, but I enjoyed it. I went in thinking, oh man, this. I wonder how I'm going to be able to relate to whatever happens in this show. But it turned out it was a lot of fun. I really had a good time.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear it.
How's the World Cup going? I gotta admit, my interest in the World Cup lasted about a week. from U.S. and who they play first, U.S. Wales to whoever they lost to, U.S. Netherlands. It was about a week-long stretch, and then it fizzled out. I assume you're still enjoying it, though.
Oh, well, I mean, I've been missing most of the games, or at least big chunks of the games, because they are right in the middle of the workday.
Right.
So it's been difficult to see them. And weirdly, technology has sort of like regressed in that respect, because it used to be easy to sort of like you'd video a TV show and watch it on your own time, but that doesn't exist anymore. I get my TV through a digital aerial, and it's one and done.
You can set up things for that.
Probably
there is devices for such things, but yes, if you don't have that, then you're back to like the 80s. Where you just
Yes.
you just live. If you didn't catch it, you live by not knowing what happened. You could set up a VCR.
Maybe. I was just thinking about that. I bet we've got one somewhere. Today, we record on the day that England play France in the quarterfinals, so that's very exciting.
Oh, yes, I'm sure it is.
And we record the day after the most entertaining game of the World Cup so far, which was Argentina against Holland, which featured a 2-goal lead going into the last 7 minutes that evaporated.
Oh.
2 bench-clearing brawls, like a hockey match. It was awesome. 16 yellow cards, which is a fantastic number of yellow
They needed a whole deck of cards for the
exactly. He's writing on the back of the card. It was a classic of that genre of game, which is like, the sort of guilty pleasure. Right. Oh, I should disapprove of all this, but I really enjoyed it, actually.
So how's the Christmas shopping going? We are, 15 days prior to the big day?
Mackelly, it's a good job my wife doesn't listen to this, right?
Right.
Because, as you can imagine, I've done absolutely nothing. Not a single thing. Oh, I got a Christmas card from you. That was very kind of you.
Oh, yes. Good. Good.
Yeah. Mine, I'm sure, is on the way.
I'll keep an eye, daily lookout for it.
Yeah, I'm the worst.
Oh, but at this point, you're running out of shipping days, so it will be all in-person shopping, I guess, right?
And I'm even less inclined to do that.
Right, which is why it's a catch-22 for you here, because you've only got a handful of shipping days left, but if you don't make that window, then you're going to have to actually go out into stores and hunt and peck for things.
There is a third, lamer option, which I'm considering.
Gift cards.
Nothing at all.
Just write IOU, put it in an envelope.
But Carson, I will say, she does like the sort of like written gift cards. Like, if you say, I will, clean the bathrooms every 2 weeks for a year. She likes that, and the woman keeps hold of it and pulls it out every couple of weekends. Like, see that? See what you said?
Off to the toilet for you.
They were intended as empty promises. Right. They are not received as empty promises.
Well, that is something that she appreciates those. I do not believe Stacy would appreciate such thing.
Tell Stacy to hold you to them. That's the trick. That's the trick. Don't just say, "Oh, that's a nice sentiment." Right. Then hold you to them, and then they become actually useful.
Right. Yeah.
Carson's got it right, you see, on this one.
Well, I'm not in the best shape either. I got the things that I knew that Stacy wanted, and now I've been scratching my head of like what else, what kind of surprise thing. We're pretty much done for the kids, but I don't know. I'm running out of time. I'm feeling the pressure. I don't know what to do. I'll figure it out, or I won't.
You'll figure it out because you think about these things. So, I mean, you just made me think that I've not even given a moment's thought to what I should buy for Carson. That's why she'll end up with a written thing saying, "I will do this task."
So it'll be Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve, yes. Exactly.
It'll be written on the back of my Christmas card.
It'd be nice if I could say, "And Mackelly will clean the bathroom."
Right.
All right, let's get down to business. How did we leave Jon Snow? Well, as we saw of Jon, he was embedded in the wildling host, befriending some of them, and trying to not be embedded with Yigrette, if you know what I mean.
Fail.
They came across the scene of carnage at the Fist of the First Men, and Jon confessed some additional intel to Mance, the number of men at the Fist of the First Men, and who was in charge. Mance is very pleased. The Night's Watch had inadvertently been keeping the others occupied, and with the old bear Giamormont presumably dead, Mance believes that now he can win the war. Jon's continued deceit doesn't look good, but Yigrette saves him by describing that he's definitely broken his vows, if you know what I mean. Mance sends them both to the wall with Styr and Jarl. Jon's grateful to her for the lie, but she reckons that it was not a lie, it just hadn't happened yet. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
Okay, that yet might come into play here.
Yeah, yes. We can edit that out in a minute.
Yes. Well, Jon walks up a hill gazing at the night sky. All the familiar constellations are present. However, since he's been with the wildlings, he's discovered that though the stars are the same here as south of the wall, the constellation names and meanings are very different.
One celestial object, known as the Thief in these parts, recently sparked a debate between Yigrette and him. She said the thief was Bright the night Jon stole her, and Jon insists he didn't steal her. He didn't even know she was a girl. Yigrette points out that if you kill a man without meaning to, he's just as dead. Jon can't refute that logic.
When Jon reaches the top of the wall, he finds Ghost sitting silent as ever. He sits with Ghost and explains that tomorrow he goes over the wall and Ghost can't come with him. He instructs the Direwolf to meet him at Castle Black. With that, Ghost takes off into the wilderness. Jon left having no clue whether he's headed for Castle Black as instructed or simply chasing a rabbit.
It kind of reminds me of the Larson cartoon where things you say to your cat and things your cat hears. And you're like, big complicated sentence to the cat, and the cat only hears its own name and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, that very well could be here.
Staring at the huge wall looming ahead of him, Jon thinks of all he's sworn to protect on the other side. He considers finding a wildling's hunting horn and blowing it to warn the Night's Watch of their presence, but it'd likely end badly for him, and he can't guarantee any of his brothers are even within 40 miles to hear it.
He's told himself he's just biding his time until the opportunity presents itself for him to escape back to Castle Black. But he and the horses are always being watched. Plus, Yigrette is never far. In fact, she's often very close. She's a major source of confusion for him. Well, for his mind, anyway. He knew he'd had to have sex with her once, or she'd know he hadn't truly broken his vows. However, what he thought would be a one-time deal has become far from it.
By Jon's estimation, the pair have copulated around 100 times since leaving the Mance Raider at the Fist. He felt guilty at first, but the more times they're together, the quieter the Night's Watch brother's voice in his head gets. His thoughts are interrupted by a Thenn calling him to meet with Styr, the Magnar of Thenn, and Jarl in the cavern they're using as base for the raiding party. Mance gave the pair co-leadership responsibilities of this raiding, however Styr doesn't behave like he's buying into that relationship dynamic.
Styr demands Jon tell him about the Night's Watch setup regarding patrols of the wall. Jon reluctantly explains that the patrols vary in frequency and departure days. However, there will be 2 rangers and 2 builders in any party. Styr asks about the staffing of the Night's Watch castles, Stone Door and Greyguard, so Jon deduces they must currently be located between the castles. When asked about the Night's Watch numbers in total, Jon exaggerates by about 300, but is called out as a liar by Jarl, who is an experienced raider.
Jon bristles at the accusation and is dismissed. He goes in search of Yigrette and finds her in an isolated cave deep in the cavern system. She's found a small waterfall pouring from the rock into a pool. She tells Jon a story of how a pair of brothers who were kings beyond the wall 3,000 years ago used these caverns to pass under the wall to the southern side. There they fought a battle where one brother died. The other led a retreat back into the caves but got lost, and he and his party were never seen again.
Jon's familiar with the story, although in his version both brothers were killed in the fighting. After some playful banter, the pair get down to their new favorite activity. Jon protests at first, but quickly gives in to his desires, professing his love of many of Yigrette's body parts.
Afterward, Yigrette explains how Craster is unlike most wildlings, as it's tradition not to bed those from your same village, let alone your own daughters. But Craster's heart is black. His father was a member of the Night's Watch who impregnated a wildling woman, then ran back to the wall, a fate Yigrette thought Jon might share, since he was clueless about what to do with her after he stole her. Again, Jon denies stealing her. She tried to spell it out at the time with the story of Bale the Bard stealing the Stark princess, but Jon didn't pick up on the clues. Seems he knows nothing. They make love one more time for good measure, then prepare to leave the cave. Yigrette wishes they could leave it all behind and stay right where they are forever.
Oh, that's a sweet sentiment.
Yes. They're sweet together. It's not the easiest chapter to discuss on our PG podcast, though, because it's pretty explicit all the way through.
Yes, it feels like we glossed over a lot of details in that chapter summary there.
Read it yourselves.
Right. It is like Martin handed us an X-rated chapter and said, "Here, good luck with this one. Let's see what you do with this one."
Read it for yourselves, but like not on a train or something with people reading over your shoulder. You know?
Solid advice right there.
So, It opens with some stargazing, and it's interesting that the stars have different interpretations. So I mean that makes a certain amount of sense. These two peoples are sundered by a great big wall, and so
Right.
they'll have different traditions and things. And honestly, constellations don't really look like what they're supposed to look like, so they're easily able to interpret them different ways.
Absolutely.
I think one was like a crown south of the wall and was a cradle north of the
Yes.
wall. And
Right.
that makes
The
perfect
king's
sense.
crown. Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Later, when he's stroking Ghost, he has an interesting thought. He wonders if Ghost has his own names for them, because Ghost obviously spends a lot of time out in the night and he sees the stars. Does he too see things in those stars? You know,
Right.
And his guesses are all things that Ghost would be interested in, like
Right.
the hare, the
Yes.
she-wolf.
Right.
And for astronomy fans, as you know, I am one. They have there's evidence of a planet here because they call the star that Yigrette refers to as the thief is known as the Red Wanderer, and
Right.
the word planet comes from the Greek for wanderer.
Oh.
So this is a planet. It's a red planet, a la Mars, perhaps. She was the reason it came up is because the day that he stole her, as she maintains, the Mars. No, that's right. Mars was bright that night. Sorry, Mars. The Red Wanderer was bright that night. But generally speaking, it's tradition north of the wall that it's a propitious time to steal a woman when the thief is in the Moon Maiden constellation.
Yeah.
That's what they
Right.
say.
Yes. Yeah. The fact that so they don't say what celestial body the Red Wanderer or the thief is. And so I went digging to confirm that it was a star. That's why in the summary it says a celestial object, because I couldn't say for certain whether it was a star or what, but
that's because your astronomy isn't good enough. The fact that it moves around between constellations proves that it cannot be a star. Stars are so far away that they don't move relative to one another over any kind of time span. The only objects that move in the constellations are solar system objects. So it would have to be a planet.
And that's why we have you here for such things.
Uh-huh.
But I wondered, him looking at the stars, that's how the chapter opens, is him walking up the hill looking at the stars. And I felt like it was in there as a way to show how the wildlings and the southerners are both similar in some ways, but also worlds apart in other ways.
Yeah.
And he's trying to straddle the two here.
Yeah, I mean, the straddling becomes harder when there's 700 foot to straddle.
Right. It spans the width of the continent. But I thought it... Yigrette talks about Jon stealing her, like fondly to the point of like how someone might think back about their first kiss. Like so.
Oh yeah.
So fondly about how he stole her.
But I think most things out of Ygritte's mouth are just messing with Jon, to be honest. I mean...
Well, that's true.
I don't think she really believes he stole her. I believe he was in a fight and he happened to kill the guy who was nearest to her, which she never admits to being her man in any way, shape, or form.
That is something I felt was unclear. Whether Oral, she says, in reference to Jon stealing her, you jumped down the mountain and killed Oral, which is all factual statements. But is she implying you stole me because you killed Oral, who was my man prior to you killing him? Or is she saying, well, you killed the only other guy around, and so you had me to yourself? It's unclear.
Yeah. But again, I don't believe a word she says. I think she's trying to make him think that because she's just having fun with him, Let's make him think that he killed my boyfriend.
Right.
Because that will make him squirm, and it's fun to make him squirm.
She does like to do that and tell him he knows nothing. She must have told him like 10 times in this chapter, you know nothing. But we did learn that it's etiquette in the wildling culture to not steal those from the same village as sex partners or spouses or however you want to define their relationship.
And that's a terrific idea, by the way, because that keeps your gene pool from getting too narrow and that which can be awkward.
Yes, and that's the exact reason she gives. A true man steals a woman from afar to strengthen a clan.
Right. And that sort of implicit understanding of biology is kind of interesting that they've grasped. I've been to a part of the world, and I don't want to point a finger at it because people from that part of the world might take offense, but it's kind of isolated, and people don't go out from it very much. And I saw a lot of birth defects. I saw a lot of children who were, and I put that down to exactly this narrowing of the gene pool.
Yeah. And, speaking of that, I thought that this concept might seem challenging to do for some of the more remote clans, like the Fens or the Hornfoots or the Ice River clan. Of course, the Ice River clan are also thought to be cannibals, so, they've got other stuff they're dealing with.
Right, possibly they break other taboos, such as marrying from their own village.
Yes, small potatoes when you're also eating people from your same village. But, those remote clans, there's probably not a lot of options outside of your village and your very close neighboring villages.
A friend of mine read a book and talked to me about it quite extensively, about the impact that the bicycle had on human evolution.
Really? Do tell.
Prior to the Well, I mean, basically it's this. I mean, prior to the bicycle, people married people from their own village.
Oh, yes.
Because villages were sufficiently remote that it was you rarely went to the next village if it was 6 miles away.
Sure.
You go there on special occasions, But with the bicycle, 6 miles became easily doable. Just
especially for a teenage boy.
Exactly, who heard that there were other girls.
Yeah, I can see how that plays out.
Yeah.
But, like you said, it's kind of a smart policy for these remote, likely uneducated folk, because we see south of the wall, even the refined, educated Southerners with all their wealth and sophistication don't always follow this rule. And I'm not just specifically speaking about Jaime and Cersei. I mean, obviously the Targaryens didn't follow that rule, but that was tradition in Old Valyria. But there's also plenty of examples of first cousins marrying, including some Starks. So
yeah, I think it's one of those things that sort of like the sort of the social constraint and the biological constraint sort of like act as a sort of a feedback loop, because people notice this. I mean, like I said, when I went to that part of the world, I noticed it. I immediately spotted the fact that they were seeing an unusually high number of birth defects amongst these people, and spotted it immediately. Now, you don't have to have been around for 10 generations and have, documentary evidence to see those things. And so people can make... Now, obviously, I understood a little bit about biology, and so I made the connection quickly, but I think people can instinctively make that connection. And that's why you get these social prohibitions, for instance, against incest.
Right.
And then that becomes sort of like... We find it revolting on many levels, but we find it revolting because we know some of the downstream implications of it.
Right.
And then those downstream, it sort of like builds on itself and ends up being an absolute taboo across society,
Yeah.
And so I think it's an astute observation by George Martin to give the wildlings, who are otherwise very loose and free, this stricture which is instinctive.
Right.
Because they know the dangers otherwise. If you marry in the same village, you end up eating each other.
Right. I like that. I like that. I like that thought. Before we move off of Yigrette...
says John.
One thing I thought about, because she's supposed to be so desirable because she's kissed by fire. She's got this red hair. So it seems like she would be highly sought after by wildling men. So it's kind of surprising that she was available, which does lead, go in the column of possibly she was Orl's woman, because, she says at the end of the chapter, they're talking about how Jon was a virgin when he met Yigrette, and he says, "Were you?" And she was like, "I'm 19, a spear wife, and kissed by fire. How could I possibly be a maiden?"
Mm-hmm.
First of all, Spearwife is like a wildling female warrior.
Yes.
So I thought, was she truly just available? She had no... Yeah, maybe she didn't have any partners she was interested in, I guess. But
Right.
you would think she would be highly sought after, you know? A lot of guys trying to steal her.
I'm going to guess that if she was with Auril, she didn't feel towards Auril the way she feels towards Jon. That's my guess here.
Yeah, she didn't seem too broken up about the
Exactly.
the whole
I
thing.
think she would at least shed a tear for Jon.
Right. I would hope so.
While he's thinking about Yigrette, he thinks she's incredibly stubborn, and he thinks she's the most stubborn woman he's ever met. And then he remembers his sister Arya, and he's like, "Oh well, about that level, shall we say?"
Yeah, and so I see you have question marks around my George Martin
Yes.
pitch letter thing.
Occasionally, Mackelly puts things in the notes, which are just to mess with me, I'm sure.
Just well, that was to remind me to mention it because so speaking of incest conversation that we were talking about just a minute ago, he mentions here that he kind of compares Yigrette to Arya, and he wonders to himself if she's even still his sister. Was she ever his sister? And that those two sentences right there made me think about, so in 93, George Martin sent a letter to his publisher HarperCollins, and in it he lays out the plot of a, I'm going to put in air quotes here, trilogy called A Song of Ice and Fire. And he goes into very...
You mean we're halfway through the last book, Mackelly?
And he goes into really fascinating detail about this story, that this trilogy that he's got in mind. And it's very cool to read because some of it has some similar ideas to what we've gotten in the actual finished product, and others are vastly different, just so different.
So there are significant deviations. It's not just not
yes.
fleshed out. There's things that he decided not to do.
Yes. For instance,
right, okay.
One plot line that he goes into rather specific detail about was the love triangle between Jon, Arya, and Tyrion, where Arya falls in love with Jon and Tyrion falls in love with Arya. And I just wonder if maybe lines like this, is she still my sister? Was she ever my sister? Or maybe put in here still early enough in the process to kind of set up that plot line, maybe distance the two as family.
It's interesting. I mean, there are more workaday explanations of that line. He's remembering the fact that he was a bastard, so he wasn't really her sister. But it is interesting that there is that sort of like that shadow of the original idea perhaps lurking behind that. Yeah.
Right. Well, of course, there's also one of the other details in his pitch letter is that Dany killed Drogo in response to Drogo killing Viserys. So, obviously that didn't come to fruition.
That's an interesting deviation too. Yeah.
There's a lot of really cool stuff. I posted on the Discord server. There's someone snapped photos of, it's like a 3-page letter, and someone snapped photos. It's on the wall at the HarperCollins office, I think. And someone published photos. But there's one paragraph that is redacted. Because
it's got spoilers for the whole thing. Interesting.
Yeah, because it gives. It's amazing how much detail he puts in it, and a lot of it didn't come to pass. But there must be something in that paragraph that is still on the table. But I'll post it out on the other social medias as well. But it was really cool, and this made me think of it.
Yeah. So the next day, Jon tries to explain to Ghost that Jon will have to climb the wall, and that Ghost has to stay on this side. He doesn't feel like the message is getting through. He did walk once with Ghost when he saw the wildlings' encampment in a dream, but he can't do it on demand, so he talks to Ghost the way I talk to my dog.
I had the same thought. Either Ghost is way smarter than Penny, or there is a significantly better connection between the two. If I tried that with her, she'd just cry for me to hold her and then growl when I picked her up.
But he does run off, perhaps, to Castle Black.
Yes, and of course, it's rather unclear.
Yeah. I mean,
But
I got to imagine he doesn't understand yet, but once Jon climbs the wall and Ghost watches him go, he'll trot along to Castle Black because that's kind of home, you know.
right, yeah. It seems unlikely that this is the last we'll see of Ghost. I did envision Jon going over the wall and then us getting maybe like a Call of the Wild POV coming from our
Ghost
silent
POV.
friend Ghost. That would be pretty neat, huh?
Well, I mean, we kind of have that through Bran's POVs. Half of them are he's in wolf form.
That is true, yes. But it's kind of similar to a lady in Nymeria being removed from the Stark girls before they get to King's Landing, because sometimes things like these direwolves, as cool as they are, they're also kind of impractical in certain situations. Like,
certainly for the CGI costs.
well, yes, but that is true. But also, like, it's kind of impractical to have these furry yet terrifying sidekicks marching along beside them in the court. Like in the court at King's Landing. So you could see Martin being like, well, that's not going to work. So I've got to remove them, at least for the time being. So, yeah. Anyway, but yes, Jon does spell it out for us. He's no Bran when it comes to warging. You mentioned that he warged once in that dream, but can't do it on command, and he pretty much spells it out. They call me a warg here, these wildlings, but if so, I'm a pretty terrible one.
Yeah, but the other Stark kids have all. I mean, we've had Jon. As well as Jon, Robb and Arya have both had at least one moment where they've warged with their direwolf.
Yeah. It seems we didn't get Robb's POV, but we got Jon seeing the wildling army through Ghost's eyes. That was when the eagle attacked Ghost, and the group turned and tried to flee. We saw Arya attacking the brave companions. She had a dream about it. Can't guarantee that it was legit, but
we're in the business of believing dreams here,
right? Yes, and then Robb. We were told Robb led his army through an unknown track around the Golden Tooth to get into the West, and it was said that he found it by his direwolf Greywind discovering it, and it's possible that was Robb warging Greywind to discover that. So
Jon does consider sending a note, tying a note to Ghost, like a Saint Bernard or a Saint Bernard, if you do the American way. But he doesn't have pen or paper or really know what to say. So
it'd also be incredibly dangerous to attach something.
Yeah. Especially if Ghost really doesn't understand what the hell he's supposed to do.
Exactly. Ghost shows up later with like a hair in his mouth.
I got a hair and a note.
Right.
Well, let's throw those both on the fire.
It's probably a wise decision not to do it. It would have been good for the Night's Watch if it worked out and Ghost managed to deliver this letter that they know to prepare for 100+ force surprise attack on the southern side of the wall. That would have been a useful bit of information. Especially, remember, Castle Black has no walls on the southern side because they're not allowed. They're not allowed to have walls on that side because of, I think it was the Night's King tried to create his own army, and so they're not allowed to do that. So, they're susceptible to such an attack from the southern side of the wall. It's just they never figured that a large enough army is going to get to that side.
Do you have a sense of how large this group is?
Yeah, so Jon thinks to us that Styr has 5 times more men than Jarl, and he has around 100 men. So you figure there's roughly around 120-ish.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that could put some damage on Castle Black. I mean, I'm not sure it could win, but it would certainly be a fight.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it would have been useful, but yeah, like we were saying, we can't guarantee that Ghost is actually going to head there. Right. I would say, though, good luck to the person who's tasked with retrieving that note off of Ghost. Just hold. I'm just gonna reach over and. Good luck with that. I don't want to draw that straw.
Yeah. So Jon hopes that Ghost arriving back at Castle Black without Jon or a note will be warning enough. But the poor old people at Castle Black, they keep getting animals coming to them without any kind of message. It's like, what is the message? Tell us, lassie.
Yeah, because he doesn't know about Sam's ravens.
Right, but the people at Castle Black do.
Right.
We got a bunch of ravens back, and now we got a direwolf. Great. But I wondered, sort of like more sort of emotionally, will this sundering of Jon and Ghost, which hasn't happened yet, but looks like it's going to, leave him in the same kind of state as Arya and Sansa? And I'm not sure how to describe that state, but lonely is definitely a part of it. I mean, they are...
Like you're missing a piece, maybe.
Exactly, yeah. So...
Yeah, I like that thought. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah. Where this group is attacking the wall is... Well, obviously it's between the Shadow Tower and Castle Black. Later on in the chapter, it tightens that up to between Stone Door and Greyguard. Those are much closer to Shadow Tower than to Castle Black, which makes sense. I mean, geographically, they would have hit the wall towards the eastern end. Towards the western end.
Jon goes, we must be somewhere between the Shadow Tower and Castle Black. And I was like, no kidding. That's like half the wall.
I had exactly the same reaction to that. I was like, yeah, Jon, we got it. I mean, like,
hey, guess what? You're on the northern side, too. In case you didn't put that one together, Sherlock.
That's like Bran and Co. heading north by following the star and ignoring the sun.
Yeah. But we do, like you said, we later discover they're between Stone Door and Greyguard, which is a good bit closer to the Shadow Tower side than Castle Black. There's only one castle called Sentinel's Stand that's between the Shadow Tower and Stone Door. And but both these castles are quite in disrepair. Stone Door is in better shape than Greyguard, but as Jon points out, which I felt like he gave away more info than he needed to. He was asked if they're manned, if those two specific castles are manned, and he offers up that only 3 castles of all of them are even manned. And he could have just said, no, those castles were not manned when I left Castle Black.
Yeah, he is a funny mix of oversharing and lying and undersharing. It's like,
right.
You might as well tell them the truth at this point, you know. I mean, every time he does a deception with them, he tightens the noose around his own neck, and it just doesn't seem worth it, you know.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's easier to not lie, just to tell the truth and play the part you've been asked to play.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like he's trying to be a spy rather than just like, doing what you have to do.
And a perfect example of this is he considers stealing a horn and blowing it to rouse the Night's Watch to this impending threat of 120 people climbing the wall. It's like, okay, good, that will get you killed, and to no avail. He then observes that there might not be a Night's Watch person within 40 miles of him, so he's going to have to blow that really hard.
Right. Yeah.
He's got to stop thinking these things. Play the part.
Right. And you have to imagine not everyone is going to make it over that wall. That's a 700-foot straight up, 700-foot straight down climb. They got 120. They might end up with 20 by the time they get to the far side.
Yeah, and the question is, I mean, Corin obviously didn't give him very specific instructions of what he was supposed to do here. So is his mission complete? I mean, he doesn't know an awful lot more than you could have guessed. Right. It's a large force. They would rather be south of the wall.
Again, not exactly earth-shattering news here.
Right. One of them is called Hornblower.
May or may not mean something. I don't know to this point still. Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is he thinks to himself, we mentioned it in the summary, he's just biding his time until the chance arrives that he can escape and ride off to Castle Black. And so either he is doing that to warn Castle Black about what's happening, about, what happened to the Great Ranging and this particular raiding and what's going on with the wildlings, or he's just giving up on his mission of figuring out what Qhorin wanted him to figure out. Why were they in the Frostfangs? What are they up to? Because, as you pointed out, he hasn't learned that yet. So,
his frequent, very frequent. I mean, I'm not sure how long he's supposed to have been there, but he's they're going at a cracking pace here. His frequent sex with Yigrette is troubling his conscience less and less with time. I would like to set him down and say it shouldn't have been anyway. You're on a mission. To fulfill that mission, you must appear to break the vow. There's a higher truth. There's a higher level to the vow than the details of it. There's the principle of the vow, which you are maintaining all the way through this, even if you are enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's kind of what Qhorin said to him the night when he told him the plan. He said, do whatever you have to do.
Right.
If you have to fight with them.
Including killing Qhorin Halfhand.
Right, yeah, right. He thinks to himself, he had to do it once to prove that he broke his vows. And the next sentence is, it never need happen again. And then the following sentence is, it happened twice more that night and again the next morning.
Yes, it didn't have to happen again, but it certainly did.
That made me chuckle.
Harking back to prior content here is that he's falling in love with Yigrette. It's not just sex. They're having sweet cuddling and they're spending time together and making a meaningful connection. This is what his uncle Benjen told him to do before he joined the Night's Watch.
Right.
Go out and see if this is for you.
Yes, is the things Jon got so mad about Benjen suggesting, and this is what he was tried to prepare him for.
Yeah. So Jarl and Styr have leadership of this group. It does seem that Styr is definitely more fit for leadership. I mean, he has a much larger force and he's clearly battle hardened. Jarl, by contrast, is it's a bit of a nepotistic appointment. He's Mance Rayder's woman's brother. Is that right? Pet. Pet is the word that she used.
So Dala is Mance Rayder's woman. Her sister, Val, Jarl is her pet. Yes.
Right. So yes, it's kind of a brother-in-law to Mance.
Right.
And so he's got this. Now, Jarl is not without skills here. He's a raider. He's climbed the wall before.
Yeah, he's done it. So he's 20 and he's been raiding since he was 12. And so he's been back and forth over the wall a bunch. And Jon thinks Styr's in command, but everyone knows it's Jarl that's going to get us over the wall.
Right.
So that's kind of what he does. And he's raided with some of the most notorious wildlings, like Alfin Crowkiller and the Weeper. Alfin Crowkiller, he got his name for his history of killing Night's Watch brothers, as you might have guessed, based on that.
Or his anti-bird policy.
Right. He's one of the bloodiest wildling raiders. He was killed by Qhorin while on the march from the Shadow Tower to the Fist. Qhorin mentions that. And, if Jarl ran with him, he's probably a rather nefarious guy by association. And then we did meet the Weeper back in the first Jon chapter of this book. He's also a notorious Night's Watch member killer, and of course he's called the Weeper because he's got watery eyes.
Yeah. I will say, actually, the first time I read through the chapter, I kept thinking there were three of them. I kept thinking that there was Jarl, Styr, and the Magnar of Then. I kept forgetting that Styr was the Magnar of Then.
Right.
So I was like, this is going to be very complicated.
Trifecta.
Yeah. So Jon describes the pattern of Night's Watch patrols along the wall. It's complicated. It's impromptu. It's not regular because they don't want it to be known by those watching. And
definitely a good idea. It's like every Tuesday at noon we send out a patrol,
exactly,
and it goes north. It goes east to west.
So Styr is the Magnar of Then. He's considered godlike by the Thens. He rules with an iron hand. So the different groups within the Wildlings have very different cultures, it seems, because we've definitely had other groups where leadership was by consensus, but this one is not like that.
Yeah, and I found it a little bit surprising that the Thens weren't disillusioned by Styr taking a back seat to Mance if they considered him godlike,
Yeah.
Think you might
Yeah.
lose some of his credibility, some of that
Yeah.
luster might have been rubbed off. Like, oh, you're just another guy. You're not godlike. You report to that guy over there.
But I guess the god of the Thens need not necessarily be the god of all the wildling.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
So, in the cavern with Jon and Yigrette, she gives some background on Craster, which is interesting. So,
While they're taking a break.
yes, breather.
Yes.
He was the son of a black brother and a wildling woman whom he stole, there's that word again, out of White Tree Village. Then the man ran back to the Night's Watch, and she came to the wall with the baby, but the Night's Watch ran her off. So that kind of leads to the sort of complicated relationship that Craster has with the Night's Watch. He is the offspring of one, but he is a wildling for sure.
And he was spurned by his father. Obviously, his father doesn't seem like he ever came back to have any...
Oh, yes. When she was chased off by the Night's Watch, I think it was with the full support and approval of the father.
Right. He wasn't kicking and screaming on the southern side, likely.
Although, maybe not. Maybe they were holding him in chains. Like, hey, you broke your vows. You're not doubling down by going living with her.
I was thinking... Craster's story might make it interesting spin-off, young Craster growing up with this torn, this difficult relationship with the Night's Watch.
I feel like that show would try to get us to believe or sort of like buy into why he marries his daughters. I'm not sure this is a show that's going to... I'm not sure your pitch is going to work. We don't have to get to that part. It can end with him, like the movie The Joker. It ends with his mental breakdown. Right.
He's a guy trying to make it in the world, and in the end, just snaps and becomes the Joker. This Craster at the end snaps and becomes someone who marries his daughters. But White Tree Village, where Craster's mother lived, that we were at that village, the very first great ranging chapter with the gigantic weirwood tree that loomed over the little houses. That was White Tree Village.
Right. Yeah. So back to the cave. Kudos to Jon. He cares about Ygritte's satisfaction, shall we say, and not every teen boy gets that idea down so quickly. It is perhaps helped by the fact she is older and more experienced, but then again, in the cavern, he pulls out moves that are new to her too. Right. So
he's a savant.
Yeah. But the one thing is, in the cavern they're able to get naked, and pretty much living north of the wall, that would be a rare and unusual treat.
Good point.
We're talking birthdays and holidays, I would think, because it's cold up there.
Yes, I take your point there. Yigrette keeps mentioning that she thought Jon would, in quotes, have her when he stole her on that mountaintop, and like we mentioned in the summary, added the story about Bale the Bard plucking the Stark princess. She uses plucking because Bale replaced the princess with the blue winter rose. And she says, I thought you'd know to pluck me for sure, but you didn't. And it sounds like she was definitely expecting to be plucked.
She's been plucked 100 times since then.
But it's unclear. It seems like she was possibly wanting it, Yeah. I thought you would know to pluck me for sure. I'm using a P, by the way.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with your diction here.
Right. It's a little bit unclear whether she was hoping for that or just expecting it.
Yeah. But of course, what she didn't know was how inexperienced Jon was,
Right.
She's actually the one doing the plucking here. He has no clue.
With a P.
With a P. So Yigrette has a fantasy about them abandoning the raiding party and running away together to live in the caves. That doesn't feel like the tough nut Yigrette that she portrays herself as, she is
Right.
falling in love with Jon. Mackelly's
Yes.
smiling from ear to ear as I
It does sound a good bit like love. Let's leave it all behind and run away together.
All right, do you have some background for us, Mackelly?
I found a little bit. There wasn't a great deal to go on in this chapter, unless you wanted the background on sexual positions.
No, please no. God, no. You know I'm English, right?
Right, yeah. That seemed like a bad idea on multiple levels. But so, Yigrette, we mentioned it a little bit in the summary. I'll expound a little more here. Yigrette tells Jon of Gorn and Grendel. They were the brothers and kings beyond the wall from 3,000 years ago. She tells of how Gorn learned to navigate these caves and come out on the southern side of the wall, and how they fought with the Starks and the Night's Watch and the Umbers until Gorn died after killing the Stark king. Then, after Gorn's death, Grendel retreated back through the caves, only to get lost, causing his death and the death of his army. Well, here's a quick story about how the brothers managed to learn these caves so well. According to the book History of the Kings Beyond the Wall, written by Maester Herrick, Grendel and Gorn were asked to mediate a dispute between a clan of Children of the Forest and a family of giants who argued over the ownership of the cavern. Seemingly, the brothers discovered that the cavern was part of a system of caverns that made its way beyond the wall. Armed with this knowledge, Gorn and Grendel tricked both parties they were hired by in order to gain unfettered access to the cavern. So the story goes, the brothers convinced both the giants and the children to swear they no longer desired the cavern. Apparently, the move gave the co-kings time and space to map out the cavern system. Well, obviously one brother was taking better notes than the other.
Ah, yes. So, comparison with the television show, Jon and Yigrette do have this scene in the grotto. The TV show makes it seem more like their first time, honestly, but and the place clearly works its magics because, as you know, the actors involved subsequently got married in real life. So,
right, yes,
that was a romantic green screen they were standing in front of.
That's right.
Pedantry. I've got a beauty for pedantry, and this is
Uh-huh.
a hark back to our last Bran chapter. If you remember the last Bran chapter, we were told that Bran was taught the constellations by Osha.
Oh, yes. Right, told him about the night, the ice dragon.
The ice
She
dragon.
told him about the ice dragon. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Whereas Jon Snow, bastard of Winterfell, not even a real Stark, was taught the constellations by Maester Luwin, who I said was derelict in not teaching Bran.
You did, I recall.
And I mean, all right, what I thought was maybe astronomy is a later lesson Maester Luwin
Right.
does for the older kids, but Jon specifically says he remembers being taught this as a boy by Maester Luwin. No excuses.
Maybe it was next on Lewin's list of subjects before everything went south. No, I like that. That's good stuff.
News and notes.
Well, we are adding another new item to our Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer tiers. We are adding... so basically what we're going to do is our sustainers can submit topics of discussion, preferably nothing too controversial, and politics or
we don't have
religion
to answer
type
all of them, right?
Right, yes, we don't. We'll submit us questions or topics of conversation, and Simon and I will just talk about them for however long it takes to...
little vignettes of us, right?
Yes, and we'll put those on our Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer page.
For all the sustainers, not just the one who asked the question.
Right, all sustainers, yes. So, but they can all send us topics of discussion, and we will discuss.
And we had a great sustainer call just recently. It was a lot of fun. We're always delighted to see you guys, and I hope more can join in the future.
Exactly. And we are going to take our a little break. We're going to take the week off between Christmas and New Year, so there won't be a regular episode that week, the December 26th. But no worries. we do have a present for you all that you can unwrap on Boxing Day.
Okay.
Oh, it's actually Tuesday, not Monday.
Oh,
Our sustainers get it on Monday.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's conclude. So Jon succumbed to Ygritte's charms. But again, he's breaking his vow, but part of keeping the greater vow.
Right.
And again, you killed Corin Harfan. That's a bigger deal than sleeping with a girl. A lot of members of the Night's Watch have slept with a girl. Not many of them have murdered the most feared fighter in the Night's Watch.
Yes, that is good distinction right there.
And naturally enough, he's falling in love with the first girl who slept with him. We all do.
Right. Yeah.
We've put so much time and effort into it, we can't imagine anyone is ever going to succumb again. So, we naturally fall in love with the first one.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't the most impactful or action-packed chapter, but I think it succeeded in its intended goal of establishing the depth of the relationship between Jon and Yigrette. Last Jon chapter, he didn't seem all that interested and often tried to steer clear of Yigrette. Now he seems rather smitten and talked about a lot of things that he, in quotes, loved about her. Mm-hmm. Mostly body parts.
I think one of the goals was to embarrass me and you, and it succeeded very well in doing that. There are clear rivalries within this group of wildlings that could be exploited by Jon. In fact, that's probably his best opportunity to make Night's Watch inroads here, is to break this group apart, because they're clearly Styr does not like sharing the command with Jarl.
Yeah.
But he's going to rely on Jarl to climb this wall.
And I like your idea about what will happen with Jon and Ghost, them being separated, like they seemingly will be here soon.
You know what I think is going to happen? I think they're going to climb the wall. It's going to take hours. They're going to come down the far side, utterly exhausted, and Ghost's going to be waiting for them on the other side. Like, I just know the quick way.
I just dug underneath it.
Yeah, didn't take me long. If he does get sundered from Ghost, will it have the same impact on him as it has had on Sansa and Arya? Which, again, it's hard to identify exactly what that is, but there's definitely a lostness and an unmooring from that which you hold dear.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then the stories and fables of the tunnels under the wall, could they come back to become a plot point?
Right. Yeah. If there's one cavern system that leads under the wall, you gotta wonder, there might be more.
All you need is a length of string.
I was thinking about, because Jon asks Yigrette, has anyone ever tried it since? And she said, yeah, but those who go too deep run into Grendel's children, meaning like zombie type things. But really, they just get lost on there. But yes, a length of string might fix that problem. But we're off to Essos next week. We've got a Dany chapter coming up where she makes a big purchase with a hefty price tag. Mm-hmm. And might there be some buyer's remorse here? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't want to miss. Tune in and find out next week.
Might there be some seller's remorse?
Possibly that too.
There's 3 ways that you could help us. You could leave us a positive review. You could buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com, or you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal, or become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm level, where you get all the benefits, including the ability to ask us questions, which we will answer just for you.
That's right. And of course, you could reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can go out and follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, of course, Discord, which is always active and entertaining, and YouTube. Don't forget to go out and listen and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.